Welcome, everyone. We will get started shortly. Thank you so much for your attendance.
Hello, I'm Kirsten Figueroa, the Commissioner of the Department of Administrative and Financial Services for the state of Maine. Welcome to the Classification and Compensation Study presentation for Maine State Government Executive Branch employees. Last year, the administration signed an agreement with the Maine Service Employees Association to perform a comprehensive review of job classifications and compensation for all executive branch positions. Our other union partners, AFS-CME, MSLEA, and MSTA, are supportive as well. The state has contracted with an experienced public sector advisory company, the Siegel Group, to conduct this study over the next several months. The purpose of the study is to ensure that job titles, descriptions, and classifications accurately reflect work performed, that classifications with similar levels of responsibility are paid equitably across the executive branch, and that we understand how state compensation levels compare to similar positions in the employment market. At the end of the review, Siegel will provide recommendations related to all of these factors. All employees will have an opportunity to participate in the study. We hope to have as much participation as possible to accurately assess positions across the executive branch. Soon after this presentation, job description questionnaires will be distributed to employees. Please be on the lookout for this. The questionnaire, while lengthy, is not overly complicated. The Siegel Group estimates that it will take about 2 to 3 hours to complete both the training and the questionnaire, depending on the type of position an employee is in. Please work with your supervisor to determine the best times for you to complete the survey. If you are in a job that has more than one employee in the same job title reporting to the same supervisor, you may complete the questionnaire as a group. You may find that this is an easier option for you, but you're not obligated to do it this way. Information about this study, including an FAQ, a copy of the job description questionnaire, and a copy of the introductory presentation, will be posted at our Classification and Compensation intranet site. A link to that site is located on the DAF's main webpage. Thank you so much in advance for your help with this. This is important information and it will be valuable to our project. Enjoy the presentation.
Hey there, everyone. My name is Dean Staffieri, and I'm the president of the Maine Service Employees Association. I'm also a voc rehabilitation counselor with the Department of Labor. Thank you for taking the time to be here today to learn about this joint labor management classification and compensation study. Along with the state and the other unions representing executive branch employees, we're excited about the opportunity this study presents to update and modernize our current systems to support the critical work all of you perform every day for the state of Maine. For us to get the most accurate and useful recommendations, we need as many of you to participate as possible. So thank you for taking that first step by watching this presentation. I encourage you to also fill out a questionnaire. I'm looking forward to filling mine out as well. We hope that all of you will choose to participate, and we've been working hard to ensure that there are options available to all employees to allow you to fill out a questionnaire, whether that's coordinating with your supervisor, with the help of a union steward, or in a group with your coworkers. If you have any questions about this process, feel free to reach out to your union, and we'll do our best to get you an answer. Appreciate your participation, and be well.
Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. Thank you so much for your attendance at this morning's presentation regarding the state's comprehensive classification and compensation study, which is a joint labor management initiative with Maine Service Employees Association, MSTA, MSLEA, and AFSCME, your state's unions. I'm about to introduce T.L. Cox. He is a consultant with the Siegel Group, which is the company that the state has contracted with through a RFP process, as with any other state project. And TL will be educating all of us today about the study, including its goals, its objectives, and a little bit about the process itself, including the survey that each of you will hopefully fill out to help us gain more information about your specific job, what you do on a daily basis. And without further ado, I now introduce T.L. Cox from the Siegel Group. Thank you, T.L.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. As Deirdre mentioned, I am TL. I'm with Siegel, and we certainly appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. If you will go ahead, Karen, and advance to the next slide, you can see that we do have a very full agenda that we'll be covering today, but despite the amount of information, it can really be summarized into three general areas. First, we want you to understand the project, understand the important role that you will play in the project. Second, we want you to understand and know how to accurately and completely fill out the questionnaire. That is the first opportunity for you to provide input into the process. And third, understanding that this may be new to many of you. You may not be experienced with projects like this. We've tried to anticipate some of the questions you may ask, and so we do want to go over frequently asked questions as well. So on to the next slide. A little bit about the project. The compensation and classification engagement is being jointly sponsored by the state of Maine and the Maine Service Employees Association with the support of the state's other unions that you saw there in the introductory video. Again, Siegel, we are an independent firm. We have extensive experience working with public sector organizations and specifically in joint labor management projects. So, we do like to emphasize the independence, the third party and objective nature of the analysis that we conduct. We have been working with the steering committee over the past couple of months, really to prepare everyone to get to the point where we can do presentations to employees today. You can see there on the screen some of the key things that we've accomplished. We've developed the work plan and timeline. We've conducted stakeholder interviews both with state management and the various unions to identify any concerns that they may collectively have with the current classification and compensation programs. We've developed communication materials, including collaborating on the intranet site that Deirdre mentioned. We have actually launched the market survey where we're comparing the state to the employment market with which you compete for the recruitment and retention of employees. Generally speaking, that's defined as the other New England states, large cities in Maine, Cumberland County, and the federal government inside of Maine, excuse me. And we've worked to develop a tool to gather information from the workforce that really, with the steering committee's goal, has been aimed at achieving the most participation possible. So over the past couple of months, throughout our work with the steering committee, those are some of the key things that we have accomplished. So the goals themselves, the study will cover all positions within the executive branch. The three primary goals are really to ensure the classification structure and the job descriptions accurately reflect the work that state employees are currently performing. At a more basic level, it really means to ensure that your title and the job description, that they're really illustrative of what it is that you're doing today. And to ensure that compensation is market competitive in order to attract and retain a diverse and highly qualified workforce. So really the goal is to ensure that the classification and compensation programs are accurate, equitable, and market sensitive. So fast forwarding to the conclusion of the project, we anticipate that after all of the analysis is conducted, that the state will have recommendations for updates to the classification structure and the job descriptions to match, the essential functions and the minimum qualifications that we gather directly from employees. And so this is the first of many times I'm going to remind you that your input, the feedback that you provide, really is the foundation at every other point in the analysis. And so your involvement really is critical to the success of this initiative. A market assessment that evaluates the state's competitive position to that competitive market that we generally identified earlier in the presentation. Recommendations regarding title changes, the alignment of jobs, pay grades, and FLSA status. For those of you who are not familiar, FLSA is Fair Labor Standards Act, and at a fundamental level, that means if a job should be overtime eligible. Recommendations based on our experience to improve the classification and compensation system, and recommendations focused on the feasibility of telework across the state. Now, in the initial presentation yesterday, we did get a lot of questions regarding if telework was in response to the pandemic, but it was not. I mean, certainly it can play a role now that things have fundamentally changed, but the assessment of telework was being considered before COVID-19 hit. And you'll see when we go through the questionnaire, one of the goals is really to understand if a position is not conducive to telework now, what is it that's really stopping an employee from being able to fulfill those responsibilities, and how might a job be made more conducive to working via telework? So that's something that we're working on as well. As Deirdre mentioned in the opening remarks, Siegel does, we provide these services to all sorts of public sector organizations. And one of the consistent themes I think that we see is when you're kicking off a project, there are always, some misconceptions or some concerns that we do like to address up front. And so that's really the purpose of this slide. So we do want to go through and explain to you kind of the scope and limits of the study with the state of Maine and the steering committee. So initially, there will be no decrease in employee salaries as a result of the study. On the other hand, pay increases or reclassifications are not guaranteed. And so we want you to understand, first and foremost, no decrease in salaries as a result of the study, but on top of that, an increase to your salary or a reclassification of your job also is not guaranteed as a result of this analysis. No jobs or positions are being eliminated as a result of this study. Fourth, the study is looking at the position, the job, the classification specification, and not the person in the role. So it's evaluating what you do, not how well you do it, not your job performance relative to that job description. And the study is not evaluating how many people are required for a particular function. So we're not doing a staffing analysis either. We've talked a lot about your involvement. Again, I've emphasized once already, your input, a description of the job that you have in your own words really is critical to our analysis. And so we wanted to ensure that the survey, the questionnaire that we'll review a little later, is widely accessible to executive branch employees. And so we do say here it can be completed on a computer, on a tablet, a smartphone, or when electronic access is not available, in a paper format. It can be completed individually or in a group of employees. And if you complete it in a group, the guiding principles we provide is you need to be in the same job title, you need to have the same general essential functions, and you need to report to the same supervisor. So if those three things are true, you can complete it in a group. We actually encourage you to do that because group completion tends to result in a more accurate and a more complete questionnaire, but you are not obligated to do so. You certainly can complete it individually if you choose to do so. The project timeline, you can see early on, we did begin work on the engagement in March. Obviously, COVID hit, and so we've been adjusting things like these employee presentations. We did, skipping down to step 3, we did begin the market assessment already. The survey has been sent to the benchmark organizations that I alluded to earlier, and so we are well within the market assessment process. These employee presentations begin the classification analysis, which you can see we're projecting right now for roughly a 4-month timeline. And overall, we are hoping that we can complete the project along with the steering committee by the end of this calendar year. So that is the high-level timeline that we are collectively working toward right now. So the questionnaire process, initially, this is where I'm going to emphasize again how important your feedback and your cooperation in the study is. So the first step in the job classification process is the employee completion of a questionnaire. As a reminder, we're asking you to describe your job, not you. We want to understand what the position is responsible for, your major duties, your responsibilities, the knowledge, skills, and abilities needed to be effective in that role, and the minimum requirements for the position, which is formalized education, certifications, as well as experience that contributes to you being able to fulfill those essential functions. After your completion, the survey then goes for a supervisory review. We want to emphasize they can provide comments and additions, but they cannot change employee responses. So one of the things that's important to a project like this is employee confidence in the process, the procedure, the integrity of the information that's being provided. And so you'll see when we get to the questionnaire itself, the supervisory comment section is actually separate from the fields where we're asking employees to answer questions. So you can see it's tracked separately. And supervisors have been directed to discuss any comments with your employees. So there is a feedback process built into the questionnaire methodology. Once the supervisor reviews it, the information then comes to Siegel. We conduct a detailed job analysis and develop job documentation and a classification structure. Based on the core content of a job, meaning the essential functions and the minimum qualifications, we will recommend individual job title assignments, and we will update job descriptions as it's necessary based on these questionnaires. So later on, we will talk in the frequently asked questions about why we're asking you to complete a questionnaire rather than relying on existing job descriptions, but we do want to talk here about the fact that those existing job descriptions may not be fully correct. They may not accurately reflect what each state position in the executive branch is responsible for today. And so we do want to capture in your own words what a position should be doing, what it's responsible for. And so that information will be used at the conclusion of the study to update the job descriptions so they'll be more accurately reflective of what you, the employees, are doing, of the important work and functions that you're doing on behalf of the state today. So some important dates. A link via SurveyGizmo, and we'll talk about what SurveyGizmo is a little later on. We'll actually show you screenshots of that tool. Links began going out yesterday. They're being sent out in batches, and so they are going out, or they began going out yesterday, more are going out today, and that will continue next Monday and Tuesday. Employees complete the questionnaire no later than July 20th. And I do want to emphasize that date is critically important for you as an employee. The survey does need to be completed by July 28th. I alluded earlier to an end of the calendar year completion date, but again, your input into this process really is the foundation of the analysis, and it's critical. And so we do ask and strongly encourage you to meet that deadline. From there, it goes to the supervisory review. They review the questionnaires and submit by August 11th. That information is then being provided to Siegel by August 25th, which is when we can really begin in earnest our work on the classification study. So, SurveyGizmo. The commissioner mentioned in the opening remarks that the goal is to get widespread participation by executive branch employees, and so one of the things the steering committee identified was SurveyGizmo as a tool to allow efficient, effective completion online. And so the SurveyGizmo link is being sent out. This is a screenshot of what that email address looks like. We do want you to be aware of what to look for, both again beginning yesterday and continuing through the 14th. So an email that looks like this will come to your inbox. It explains, at a high level, some of the things we've talked about this morning. And Karen, if you would go to the next slide, you can see that there is a link that says click here to start the survey. That is the hyperlink that you will click in your email that will open the SurveyGizmo webpage, and that will provide you access to the information that we are collecting via SurveyGizmo in that questionnaire. So again, be on the lookout for this email and click that link to start the survey. You can see at the bottom here, for any questions, you can certainly email classification.compensation@maine.gov. That is an email address that does appear later on in the frequently asked questions, so we won't repeat it again here, but I do know that BHR welcomes questions from employees. I've actually been watching the FAQ and see that you've been asking them there as well, so please continue to do that. If we don't address your questions later on in the presentation, we will set aside some time to do so. So both today during the presentation at that Q&A link as well as that email address, we do welcome your participation in any questions you may have. So if we could go to the next slide. So an overview of the SurveyGizmo tool. Your TAMS ID is a required field. Please ensure it's recorded accurately and correctly. And when we get to a screenshot of the SurveyGizmo questionnaire, we'll show you where that goes. The mechanics of the survey, you can actually navigate to different pages in a couple of ways. Across the bottom of the screen, you'll see that there are numeric pages that you can click on and go to a specific page. Also, once you complete a page, you can click the Save and Continue button. Your supervisor's email is required. I want to emphasize that again. Your supervisor's email is required in the survey. That is how within the survey we have the workflow to route your completed questionnaire to that next level for review. So we encourage you to make sure you have it recorded accurately before even beginning the survey so that you know you're entering it correctly into the appropriate field. You can save your questionnaire and return to it later. You heard in the commissioner's opening remarks that the questionnaire and the presentation collectively take 2 to 3 hours depending on your role. Siegel estimates that the questionnaire itself will take you 1 to 2 hours depending on the position you hold, and so we understand you may not be able to do 1 to 2 hours uninterrupted. So SurveyGizmo does have the ability to save and return to it later. But remember, you don't have to complete the full survey at once, but you must complete that first full page so that you can click save and that the tool will then save the progress that you've made. The supervisor comments are the only place where your supervisor can provide additional information. And after completing the 16th page, which you will see as job series differences, the questionnaire will actually take you to a review page where you can both look at the information you've entered to verify it's complete and accurate, and download a PDF version so you have it for your record. So once you've taken a look and you verified that the questionnaire reflects what you want it to reflect, you click the submit button, and that's how it's routed for approval. A reminder here, we do want to underscore you can only do that once. So please ensure everything is complete and accurate before clicking submit and sending it to that next level of review. So this is a screenshot of what the first page within SurveyGizmo looks like. You can see the TAMS ID is a required field. Again, to emphasize, please make sure you enter that accurately and correctly. Your email, you do not, and I want to emphasize, you do not have to have a state email address. We recognize that many employees may not have access to a state email account, and so you can use your personal email account to complete this survey. We'll talk a little later on about how to do that, but we do encourage you, enter your email address there, both your state or your personal email address, because that is one way that you can be contacted about the questionnaire, about further communications in the project. Then your last name and first name. We do want to associate questionnaires to make sure that employees are having an appropriate way of providing feedback, their perspective on the roles. Your official job title, I want to explain that is your formal job title within the state. And then if you use differently a working title, we like to capture that as well. As we mentioned earlier, multiple employees, and remember there are 3 guiding principles. You need to be in the same job title. You need to have the same key responsibilities, essential functions, and you need to report to the same supervisor. If those 3 things are true, multiple employees can complete a complete a single questionnaire. In the event you choose to do that, this field is for multiple employees' TAMS IDs, and we do need those separated by commas. So for multiple employees, this is the box where you would enter the TAMS ID separated by commas for each employee that the questionnaire applies to. The next question, what is the one-way distance in miles between your home and your normal work reporting location? And again, we understand that's drastically changed due to COVID, so we want to understand the distance when not working remotely due to the pandemic. Again, the idea behind that has to do with the state's analysis of telework. Your department, and if you would, Karen, go to the next slide. Your division within the department, and then information on your supervisor. So your supervisor's name, you can see we ask for the first name, then their last name, their email address, and as a their title, and then their email address. And as a reminder, that email address is critically important because that's how your completed questionnaire is routed to the supervisor for approval. You can see here the Save and Continue button that I alluded to earlier. On each page at the bottom, you do have the ability to save it. And you can see here the numeric page numbers that you can use to navigate directly to a specific page as well. So the employee instructions, we encourage you to read it carefully, enter your responses provided in the appropriate field. The due date, again, submit your questionnaire no later than July 28th. And the survey is then forwarded to the supervisor for approval once you click that submit button at the conclusion of the survey. For supervisors, we want you to make sure employees are completing these by the deadline. Encourage employees, again, who are in the same job title, who have fundamentally the same responsibilities, and who report to the same supervisor. Encourage them to submit a group response because, again, our experience has shown that it does result in a more comprehensive questionnaire. But again, as a reminder, they're not obligated to do that. If employees choose, they can complete either individually or in a group. Review the employee's answers. Ensure their response reflect their current task. This is really important. This is current responsibilities, not something obscure they were asked to do 3 years ago, and not anticipated changes to the role. We are capturing a snapshot of the essential functions and the minimum qualifications and the KSAs that a job has today. Provide any comments in the comment box provided. And again, for everyone tuning in, you'll see that that supervisory comment box is separate. And you can see here, do not edit or change the employee's response. And finally, do not make comments regarding the employee's individual performance or their personal capabilities. The purpose of this questionnaire is to capture information on the job. So we do not need in the supervisory comment section feedback on performance or their personal capabilities or abilities. That review is completed no later than August 11th. And as a reminder, for anything you enter in the supervisory comment box, and I see here that we want to emphasize they're approving, they're adding, they're not necessarily approving or changing what an employee wrote. So we do encourage you to share your perspective with the employee on what they've provided. So that review process is really for them to augment, not to change what an employee submitted. Thank you, Karen, for emphasizing the questions that were coming in. If we could, let's go to the next page. So the basic job summary is where we ask for 2 to 3 sentences that explain the primary responsibility of your role. So at a high level, you can see here we've provided an example: to receive and process incoming invoices in an efficient and timely manner, to assist vendors with billing questions and issues. So you can see here that we're not asking for a lot of information. As you can see, there are 16 pages to the questionnaire and sufficient space later on for you to elaborate. This is the high-level basic purpose of your position. So limit it to 2 to 3 pages and provide a succinct description of what it is that your job is generally responsible for on behalf of the state. So that then feeds into the next section, which provides the opportunity to describe each of your essential functions in greater detail. So overall, it's not intended to be an exhaustive list of everything it is that you do. So let's go to the next page. So you'll see there are 7 questions. These 7 questions are key duties, essential functions is another accurate way of describing that. And you can see here there are some very specific instructions for how you're being asked to provide this information. Because of the specificity we're asking for, we do encourage you, take out a piece of paper, write down what it is that you do, what it is that you spend the most time on, in your view, what you believe to be the most important aspects of your job. And as you begin writing it down, you'll begin to see how it takes shape into kind of the format that we've asked you to provide. So in descending order, meaning start with your most important, we want to know what it is that you do. What are the key functions, those primary responsibilities that you do on behalf of the state, starting with your most important. And the general rule that we provide is ensure that one of these functions takes up at a minimum 5% of your time on an annual basis. You know, we understand jobs change throughout the year. You know, you may spend more time on something at one point in the year than you do later. And so it may be a good idea for you to look at your job annually, and you can see we've provided here 5% is really about 2.5 weeks per year, or about 2 hours a week. So try to limit what you provide to those time frames. Anything less than 5% of your time probably is not an essential function. It's probably a task that you would be doing likely to complete one of the essential functions that you've listed. Again, we're asking you to describe your job as it exists today, not how it was in the past or how you think it should be in the future. Describe those duties as if you were explaining them to someone who's not familiar with your work, or someone who's not familiar with the functions of state government. So don't use abbreviations or acronyms or proprietary information. Describe them in a general manner so that it's easy to analyze and understand what it is that you do. There is a section, as you'll see on the next slide, where you indicate the frequency with which you perform these duties, daily, weekly, and then the percentage of time you spend on the responsibility in a typical year. Below that, you'll see that there are knowledge, skills, and abilities that you believe are necessary to successfully perform that essential function. Knowledge, skills, and abilities are things that you would gain through a certification process that we talked about above, your minimum qualifications. Skills or abilities that you gain either through that formal education or that job. So the KSAs that you think are needed for that position. And we do actually ask you, to use action verbs. And you can see here some examples: prepares, calculates, operates. And the rationale for that is, and again, we've talked about this before, your existing job description may not be fully reflective of things like these essential job functions. And so action words will be very useful when we're providing any necessary updates or developing job descriptions for new classifications. So you can see here the first box, the duty or responsibility that takes the greatest portion of your time. Again, there are 7 of these. This is where we ask you to describe, really in narrative format, that duty or responsibility that you think is essential, critical to the work that it is that you perform. And you can see at the top the instructions, your actual duties, even if they are different from your current job description. The percentage of time is a drop-down box in 5% increments. As a reminder, an essential function should be something that takes up at a minimum 5% of your time. And so that's why you see the breakdowns here. So select the percentage of time that each function takes in a typical year. You see at the top, they should total 100%. So you're describing the job from a holistic perspective. If you would, let's go to the next slide. The frequency, you see the options are daily, weekly, monthly, semi-annually, annually, or other. And then below that, Karen, on the next slide, you can see the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are necessary for the successful performance or fulfillment of that job. And so, again, to summarize the essential functions, Minimum of 5%, high level key responsibilities, functions, duties that you're performing on behalf of the state. Describe them in a generic manner without acronyms or proprietary terminology that someone not familiar with your role or someone not familiar with state government would understand. Should add up to 100% and the knowledge, skills, and abilities necessary to fulfill that function. Again, there is space rather for 7 functions. And so this is one of the many areas where you're asked to provide detailed information on the job. And as a reminder, we're asking you to describe the job as it currently exists, not as it existed in the past and not how you envision it existing in the future. Telework. There is a telework section for each one of the essential functions. So there are 7 spaces for telework. I want to address it differently because the idea behind this is the steering committee wanted to collect if a job can currently be accomplished via telework, and you can see here the options are yes and no. And if it cannot be accomplished via telework, how could you accommodate that? So this is an area for you to provide feedback on individual functions if they're not currently conducive to being able to, if they're not conducive to being accomplished remotely, if you have feedback or guidance for how that might be accommodated. So again, to clarify, this does exist for each one of the functions, but I wanted to tackle those differently so that you understood what an essential function was, what we were looking for, and then why we're asking for the telework information. And you'll see as we proceed through the slide that the survey comments, again, are separate. The comments are separate. So going back to the question that Karen inserted into the meeting chat earlier, the supervisory comments are different from what the employee provided. So again, just so everyone viewing understands the integrity of the process, the openness of the process, supervisory comments are tracked separately in the questionnaire as they're being entered. So Karen, let's proceed. Competencies. So you can see at the top, we've got a disclaimer. It is not meant to be an evaluation of your performance. Again, I continue to emphasize throughout the presentation, this is the job, not the person in the job, not how well you as an individual perform in the role. And so what we want to collect here is what are the competencies and how applicable are they to your job responsibilities as a whole? So you can see there are several competencies here. We won't go over them all. Analytical thinker, being customer focused, an effective communicator, but we're asking you to select via the drop-down box how applicable each competency is to your job. So not applicable, somewhat applicable, or very applicable. Next page, please. Again, just emphasizing at the bottom, the grayed out supervisor box showing, demonstrating that supervisory comments are separate. This is another good time to emphasize that for any supervisors in the audience today, we absolutely encourage you, direct you really to share with employees as you're reviewing the feedback, share with employees if you're augmenting, if you have a different perspective on any of these pages. Next page, please. Discretion and independent judgment. So what we're looking for here is whether your job has to exercise discretion and independent judgment on a regular basis. And so we provide some examples here. Some of the things that I would highlight of jobs that do require discretion or independent judgment. Do you affect the overall policies of your agency? Do you depart from standards or protocols without prior approval? Do you participate significantly in formulating policies? Do you plan short or long-term objectives? Do you handle complaints or disputes or grievances without policies, protocols, standards, or approval? And do you commit your agency in matters that have just very significant impact? Discretion and independent judgment is not the collection of facts to provide for other people's review, applying generally existing procedures or making a decision on which procedure to follow, performing clerical work, handling cash, tabulating data. Those are not discretion or independent judgment. So you can see we've provided a lot of different information here. If you would, Karen, going to the next page, you can see that we ask you to provide whether your job requires discretion or independent judgment. And then from your perspective, the kinds of decisions or actions that you are empowered to make that require you to use discretion. So we've got a description. We ask you to say yes or no, and then we ask for an example so that we can take a look at, based on your response, the level of discretion and independent judgment that your position requires. Job-related experience. So the next couple of slides are going to be for minimum job qualifications. Again, I want to emphasize we're looking at what does the job require, not what does the incumbent within a job have. So let's talk through that. For years of experience, what we want to understand is what is the minimum experience requirement you believe is necessary for employees in your position. And you can see there is a drop-down box that limits what you can select. Everything from no experience required all the way up to more than 9 years of experience. Then there's a box where we ask you to describe the specific type of experience. So going back to one of the examples we provided earlier, working with vendors and doing accounts payable, maybe you need experience in an accounts payable environment, or maybe you need experience working with external vendors. So that box is where you're allowed or encouraged really to provide detailed information on the type of experience you believe is necessary for a role. Going there to education, again, we want to know what the minimum education requirement is, not what an incumbent themselves possesses. So you can see it's less than high school up to a graduate degree. And again, let's say your job requires a bachelor's degree and it needs to be in computer science. This is where you would specify the appropriate type of formalized education for the level of education that you've selected. Licenses and certifications. This is for professional licenses, registrations. One of the questions we received yesterday is, what if my job requires me to go through continuing education programs to maintain a license or certification? This is where you would list that. The next three questions are about a commercial driver's license, or CDL. And so if you'll proceed to the next few slides, Karen, you can see that we ask if it requires a CDL. If yes, which class? And then on the next slide, does it indicate any special endorsements? Again, emphasizing a separate box for supervisory comments. Management and supervision. This is where we want to understand the responsibility that a job has really for achieving results through other people. And so you can see number one is no responsibility for the direction of supervision or supervision of others. And number 6 is managing and monitoring the work performance of an entire bureau or office. So it goes really from no responsibility all the way up to high-level executive responsibility. And again, you know, this factor measures supervisory, managerial responsibilities. Think of it again as achieving results through other people. And so you'll see on the next slides that what we're looking at is what is the nature of the supervision. You can see 6 different levels, again, ranging from none to overseeing an entire bureau or office. And at the top, and again, you'll notice this in the online questionnaire as well, there is a descriptor for semi-complex and complex. Those that fall into the first really are somewhat technical, and they're in an area where work methods are fairly well established. Complex are in an advanced field where work methods really follow only general, sometimes maybe not even standardized processes. So those are the descriptors we're looking for. And so again, what we're asking you to do is to select the appropriate level, and along with that, the complexity associated with the supervision. Again, as a reminder, that's the complexity of the work that you are supervising. If you selected options 4, 5, or 6, and you'll see what those are in the questionnaire. So if you select questions 4, 5, or 6, we ask you to list the number of positions that your job typically has responsibility over. So full-time, part-time, contract, part-time, temporary, or seasonal. That was another question we got pretty consistently yesterday, is, you know, about the nature of the work that you're overseeing. This is where you specify the type of job titles. Going to the next page, you'll see that this is the title and the names of the employees of your direct reports, and then any additional comments you may have regarding that supervision. So where you don't see a drop down, it is an open box that enables you to type directly into that field. Human collaboration looks at the job requirements, the personal interactions outside your direct reporting relationships, and the impact of those interactions on the organization. So you see we provide some examples: the general public, other divisions, other governmental organizations, contractors, suppliers. You can see, much like management and supervision, there's a number of different levels, which is number 1, regular interaction that is really just exchanging and receiving information, going increasingly higher to other levels within this particular characteristic. So if you would, let's go to the next slide. You can see there are 5 levels with limited and significant impact. Again, much like management and supervision, you'll notice in the online questionnaire, each of those descriptors have text explaining to you what is considered limited human collaboration, what is considered significant. Going to the next slide. The types of people, the titles of people that you're interacting with, the amount of interaction, meaning the frequency. Freedom to act and impact of actions. This looks at a general level, the extent to which you can act in the absence of supervision or standard operating procedures, and the degree to which mishandling the situation or achieving the situation could affect, and you can see here, financial, public, or employee relations. So the general description here is, remember, it's not just immediate supervision that may impact your freedom to act. You may operate within very well-defined methodologies, policies, procedures, or maybe you're in a job that's kind of working without a net. So it looks at that, and then what is the likely impact of your responsibilities on the organization. Again, you can see that there are different levels, 1 through 5. Oh, it's okay, Karen, you can stay on the next slide. 1 through 5. Again, emphasizing there are descriptions for moderate freedom to act, significant freedom to act. So again, a drop-down box. Let's go to the next slide. Examples of consequences or errors that could be made by someone in your position. We understand there may be some concern there. This is just hypothetical, helping us understand the role. Let's go to the next slide. Knowledge and skills, I don't want to belabor the point. 4 areas with standard and comprehensive descriptors. Let's go to the next slide. 4 different levels for you to choose from. Fiscal responsibility is accountability for the budget. So again, 1 to 5 levels of fiscal responsibility. Again, if you would, let's go to the next slide. 5 different drop-down options for you to select the fiscal responsibility of your job. Working conditions and physical effort. It looks at the physical working conditions, the surroundings, and the extent to which they make the position disagreeable. So you can see there are two. It's good, satisfactory, and disagreeable, again with definitions here. And then with your physical effort that's required, sedentary, medium, and heavy. So you'll see on the next slide that you select the working environment and then the physical effort that's required for your position. Okay, let's continue. Working environment with a frequency drop down for how often you have to work in those different environments. Let's go to the next page. If you select other above, you'll notice there's a box there where we ask you to provide an explanation. Again, the save and continue button at the bottom. Exposures to hostile, threatening members of the public, violent members of the public, extremes in temperature, communicable diseases you can see other than COVID, or in light of everything that's happened since the engagement began, COVID. So those are exposures, again, with a frequency drop down. Let's go to the next page. Job series differences. I do want to talk through this. You'll recall earlier in the presentation, we asked you to provide your perspective of the differences among levels in a job or a career family. So we ask you to provide the titles as well as the differences that may exist. So this is, you can see we provide an example, customer service specialist 1, 2, or 3. In your mind, this is your perspective of what is a meaningful way to differentiate among levels in a position, among increasingly responsible job titles within a family or series. If you don't believe there's a difference, you can certainly note that as well. This is a text box and allows you to type directly in. So if you're in a job having multiple levels for advancement, we really need your perspective on what you believe to be the most meaningful ways of differentiating among those different jobs. Following this is where you can save. If you would, Karen, go to the next slide. It asks you to review your questions. Again, so let's go to the next slide. We'll show you what that looks like. Once you've completed your review, at the bottom, you'll notice this is where you do have the ability to download a PDF version of your responses for your records. And clicking submit then routes it to your supervisor for review. So let's show what that final looks like when you click submit. It asks you to confirm, again emphasizing make sure it's complete and accurate before you do so. And then once you submit it, you get the confirmation page where it's routed to your supervisor. So that is the questionnaire. Let's go ahead and proceed, Karen, to the supervisory review section. Again, just for visibility purposes for supervisors, you can see here that in addition to those boxes that are tracked separately for employees, this is an area for supervisors to put any additional information. We do ask for your name, your title. If you think the current title is appropriate, let us know. If you think the job of the questionnaire that you're reviewing has a more appropriate title, you can let us know that. And then to elaborate on anything else you think we should know about the role. Supervisory review, August 11th. So again, we want to move it along fairly quickly. So, we do want to talk through, we hope the overview that you've seen today has been informative, that you understand, again, how to complete the questionnaire and how important the feedback you provide is to our analysis. We see that many of you have used the Q&A within the broadcast, but we did want to address some of the more frequently asked questions. So some of these have been asked in the Q&A, so we hope they provide some clarification. First of all, why is the state conducting the study? To reiterate, the primary goals are to ensure that titles, descriptions, and classifications accurately reflect the important work that you're performing. We want to understand how state compensation compares to the market, because the state, the unions that everyone was mentioned, that they understand that competitive, consistent wages help attract and retain a highly qualified and diverse workforce. And finally, the last goal is really to ensure that classifications with similar levels of responsibility are paid equitably across the state. Who's overseeing the work? The State of Maine's Bureau of Human Resources is working with the Maine Service Employees Association to manage the project, and the other union partners such as AFSCME, MSLEA, and MSTA are supportive of the engagement as well. And as you can see from the names on the screen, the steering committee is comprised of members from the Governor's Office, the Bureau of Human Resources, the Department of Administrative and Financial Services, and the Maine Service Employees Association. So if you would, let's go to the next slide. How many employees are being asked to participate? So I think I addressed this earlier, but as a reminder, all employees are being given the opportunity to provide input, and we collectively hope to have as much participation as possible across the executive branch. How will I be involved? You'll be asked to complete a questionnaire no later than, and I continue to emphasize this deadline, no later than July 28th, that collects your perspective concerning the work that you perform. And we do want to remind you, this is about your essential functions, the minimum qualifications of the job, the work that you do, not how well you do it. Will the questionnaire be completed during my normal working hours? It can be completed during your regular schedule. Please work with your supervisor to set aside time to complete the questionnaire. If you prefer, you can choose to complete the questionnaire on your own time. How long will the questionnaire take? We estimate it will take a total of 1 to 2 hours depending on the type of position you're in. As I mentioned earlier, you don't have to complete it all at once. You can save it and work on it at a later time. And given that it does take a total of 1 to 2 hours depending on the role, another reminder, please work with your supervisor to determine the best times for you to complete it. Next slide, please, Karen. Can multiple employees complete a questionnaire? As a reminder, I gave you 3 guiding principles. If you're in the same job, if you're performing the same work, and you're reporting to the same supervisor as the other employees, you can complete the questionnaire as a group. And again, we encourage you to do that. Our experience shows it typically results in a more accurate and complete representation of the job. You also may find it easier, but you're not required to do it. Again, it is your choice whether to complete an individual or a group questionnaire. Receive my questionnaire. We're going to take a little more time here. So beginning yesterday, the questionnaire is being sent in batches electronically to employees. For those of you without access to state technology, such as an email address, a computer, a cell phone, or who for maybe other reasons are unable to access it, supervisors are asked to assist you with access and to determine if a computer can be made available, to complete the questionnaire. As a reminder, you can also use your personal smartphone, tablet, or computer. If you don't have a state email address and you've not already provided a personal email, you can still complete the questionnaire online by emailing classification.compensation@maine.gov. Again, that's classification.compensation@maine.gov with your name and your personal email address, and you'll be sent a SurveyGizmo link for completion. And finally, if electronic access is simply not possible, ask your supervisor to provide a paper copy. Although electronic is preferred, paper copies will work. What if a position is vacant? So what about vacant positions? I noticed this morning early, this was a question coming in to the Q&A. If a position is vacant, the immediate supervisor is being asked to complete a questionnaire based on what they know about the position. So for those of you that have asked, we hope that answers the question. So for vacant positions, the position's immediate supervisor is being asked to complete the questionnaire. Let's go to the next slide. What if I'm on a temporary assignment or in an acting capacity? If you're serving in an acting capacity or on a temporary assignment, complete the questionnaire for your permanent position. The supervisor of the temporary position will be responsible for completing that questionnaire as if it were vacant. What happens if my supervisor doesn't agree with my answers to the questionnaire? Now, this is one I want to provide some clarification on. I know earlier in the presentation I used the term approval. I meant approval of the technology routing the questionnaire through completion. So I want to emphasize your supervisor does not have to agree with your response. It's possible they see something you may have overlooked. They may add it to your questionnaire. As I emphasized several times throughout the presentation, there's a section specifically noted for your supervisory comments. Your supervisor has been directed, and you heard me mention this during today's presentation, to discuss with you what they may have added and to show you areas where they have a difference in perspective. Why are employees being asked to complete a questionnaire? Can't we just use the state's classification specification? The work currently performed may not be accurately described in your classification specifications. So questionnaires that you complete, and again, you're giving us your perception of the job in your own words, those questionnaires will be used to assist in the update of job descriptions as they're needed. How will I get updates or additional information regarding the study? Information about the project, including frequently asked questions, a copy of this presentation, will all be posted at BHR's Classification and Compensation intranet site. And you'll have access to that while on the state network. That was one of the things we emphasized yesterday. So to access the BHR Classification and Compensation intranet site while you're on the state network, that link is located on the Department of Administrative and Financial Services intranet webpage. Additionally, the state will continue to provide communications to employees at important points in the process. Let's go to the next slide. Some of my regular assignments have been impacted by COVID. Should that affect my response to the questionnaire? The questionnaire is intended to capture the normal responsibilities of your position, both before and after COVID. So if your normal responsibilities have changed since the onset of the pandemic, you should still include your pre-COVID responsibilities with your information. So as an example, if your position previously included meeting with members of the public, but you haven't done that since March, you should still consider meeting with the public part of your regular assignment. This was another question that we had throughout our first presentation, and although I haven't looked at the Q&A, my strong assumption is a lot of people have probably asked today. I have a pending functional job analysis, or FJA, either individually or as a group. How will this process impact that? Should I still fill out a questionnaire? The current FJA, or functional job analysis system, is still in place and hasn't changed. Participating in this study will not diminish your rights within that current process. So while this study could still result in recommendations that affect employees who already have pending FJAs, it will not affect the current process at this time. Okay, so furthermore, currently pending FJAs or those under appeal will not be considered as part of the study. So in order to have your position considered as part of this comprehensive review, we strongly encourage you to complete a questionnaire. Let's go to the last FAQ, please. I have a disability and require an accommodation to complete the survey. If you require an accommodation, please contact your EEO coordinator with as much advance notice as possible to ensure that they have sufficient time to work with you to meet your specific needs. To contact your EEO coordinator, please reach out to the Human Resources Unit that supports your agency and ask to be connected with the EEO coordinator. To find your Human Resources agency, you can see there is a hyperlink there that identifies the HR professionals that work with your individual organization. So that is the last of the frequently asked questions. As I mentioned earlier, we tried to anticipate what many of you would be asking, and so we hope that they've provided some clarification. So now I'll ask Deirdre to rejoin us and see if there's anything else we might need to answer. You're on mute.
I guess I was. Thank you for letting me know, TL, as always. Thank you again, TL, for that very informative presentation. We appreciate so much the work that you and your colleague, Elliot, have done to help the state with this study and to help us get this moving forward. We do have a few questions in the chat that haven't been answered yet. We also have a few questions that were asked by more than one person. So we're going to try and answer those to the best of our ability in the time remaining. So the next question is, we had several people ask whether if an employee is new to a position, how to handle that situation, who fills out the survey, etc. What we would say is that if an employee is new to the position and they're still learning their job, they're still kind of getting their feet wet, that new employee should complete the survey, him or herself. Do the best you can. And if there's something that you don't know the answer to, you can write, NA for not applicable, or you can write, I'm still learning my job. There are multiple ways to go about this because there are actually narrative spaces in the survey for you to add a little bit more detail. These are not all yes or no questions. These are not all multiple choice questions. So it was a good question. We're glad that it was asked. We just wanted to make sure that new employees, it's okay if you don't have all the answers or you think you don't have all the answers.
Can I add to that as well, Deirdre?
Yep,
one of the things I emphasized a few times in the presentation is group format. If one of the new employees is in a role that, again, meeting the 3 criteria we described, in a role that has the same job title, that performs basically the same functions and reports to the same supervisor, group completion might be a good option for that new incumbent as well.
Thank you so much, TL. And again, if you want to fill out as a group, the only requirements for that are you have the same title and you report to the same supervisor. Do not fill out a questionnaire as a group if you have a different supervisor or you're not in the same title.
Or you do different things. We need to make sure
things. Right. We can't emphasize that enough. Next question. Someone asked about the KSA page of the survey. We had a few questions about KSAs. KSA stands for knowledge, skills, abilities. Someone asked for examples of what that looks like. I believe there are some examples on that page of the survey. Is that correct, TL?
Let me see here, since I am working with screenshots. I believe so. Just let me look. It doesn't look like there are, so let me field that. So knowledge, skills, and abilities, the best way of thinking about it is prior to getting a job, you had to meet a certain minimum threshold. So a minimum educational requirement, a minimum experience requirement. KSAs are the knowledge is what would you have learned through that certification process, as an example, or if your job requires an associate's degree, what would you have learned in the attainment of that associate's degree that allows you to successfully fulfill a role. Skills are kind of the same thing through a certification process. What skills or aptitude would you have learned in order to be able to perform those essential functions? And so that's really what knowledge, skills, and abilities are, is, by looking at the minimum qualifications of a role and by understanding what are the key responsibilities of a position, what are the key duties for a job, what should an employee have that enables them to successfully perform in that particular function. So, as an example, the negotiation of contracts, someone needs to have an understanding of contractual terms and conditions, things like that.
Thank you for those examples, TL. Looking at the next set of questions, someone asked about acting capacity. So occasionally this happens where someone will be in an acting capacity or an interim position. And sometimes that happens for a couple of years or a considerable amount of time. Do the best you can with answering the survey. If you have specific questions related to your position, please email us, classification.compensation@maine.gov. That email address is also located in Commissioner Kirsten Figueroa's email from July 1st. If you forget the email address, it's also going to be posted on our intranet page, which we've posted a link to. It's also found in the slide deck for this presentation. I will also add that the slide deck will also be posted at our intranet page. However, if anyone requires an accommodation, we reiterate that if you need an accommodation and would like to have a copy of the slides, please contact your EEO coordinator or email classification.compensation@maine.gov. And I sound a little bit like a used car salesman, but I'm going to go with it because that email address is very helpful. Next question. And again, we are monitoring that email account quite frequently and responding as quickly as we can to those questions because we understand that this is something new and we want to make sure that we try and answer everyone's questions in a timely fashion. So, joking aside, happy Friday. And I'll go to the next question. Someone asked, can we see an example of the email we will receive to complete the JDQ to ensure we do not label it as spam? That is a really excellent question. TL, could you show the slide, or Karen, could you show the slide where we have the screenshot of the email that folks will receive so that we can get one more time?
Let's use Karen since she had the slide deck up, if that will work.
Correct. Yep. Thank you, Karen. So that might take just a second to pull up that slide, but we will pull up that slide for the folks who asked because I know that there are concerns about making sure that email doesn't go to the delete box by accident. Sometimes we delete an email by accident. We don't want that to happen. Going to take 1 second. I'm also monitoring the questions still. If someone has a very sort of specific, oh, here we go. Thank you. So this is the screenshot of a sample email. The email that you will receive will look somewhat like this, and it'll be coming from the State of Maine BHR, Bureau of Human Resources, and it's a welcome to complete the survey, and it'll include a link for you to fill out. That link is very helpful to have because, as we all know, you can fill things out online pretty efficiently, and it helps us with the data collection. It makes it faster. It makes it more efficient. This survey is fillable on a smartphone if the only internet capable device you own is a smartphone, which that is the case for lots of folks. It's also fillable on a laptop or a desktop computer. So if you, again, we also emphasize that if you have very specific questions that were not covered during the Q&A section right now, please email us at classification.compensation@maine.gov. We have several people monitoring our inbox, and we'll do our very best to respond to you as quickly as we can. Someone asked if different titles are performing the same work, Is it helpful to identify that somehow? Without more detail, I don't know that I can give a real robust answer to that, but you can certainly note that in your survey. If you think there's something sort of unique or peculiar about the work that you do, or the fact that some people do your work and they're in a different title or vice versa, you can certainly note that in the survey answers. Yeah, if you think it's important, chances are we think it's important too. We're trying to get we're trying to get as much data as we can about the positions, the various positions that we have in Maine state government. We want to know from you, person doing the job, what the details of your job are. Someone asked, what happens for an employee who is planning to retire within the next several months? Very good question. First of all, thank you for your dedication and your service. Retirement is an exciting milestone for folks when they get to that point. We do ask that you still plan on completing a survey to the best of your ability based on the job you have now. If you are planning to retire, that's wonderful. We still want to know about that position that you fill and what your daily job duties are, because it's helpful to us for data gathering and for analysis of that data. To that end, we also, some of these questions we won't have answers to until we get the data back. There will be a data analysis period by Siegel, the state and MSEA as co-partners in this survey will be involved as well. The steering committee meets on a regular basis to talk about what we're seeing and what we will do going forward. But some of these questions are not answerable until we get the data. Someone asked, can we get a copy of our current job description prior to completion of this survey? That might be helpful for those of us who are newer employees. Certainly, you are always welcome to ask your supervisor for a job description. And as a new employee, your supervisor should provide you with a position or title description. So thank you for that question. We've got a lot of questions about FJAs, which are also known as functional job analysis. Any unionized employee and any member of Maine management, of course, has the right to submit an FJA at any time. Management also has the ability to submit an FJA. If you have a pending FJA and you are interested to know what the status is, please reach out, classification.compensation@maine.gov, and we can answer those questions. But because those are so specific to the person who filed the FJA, it makes more sense to just reach out to us directly. Someone asked about day-to-day supervision because they might have been sort of quote unquote on loan to another division or another working group. Again, answer to the best of your ability, and you can note that your supervisor of record might be different from the person who supervises you in reality on a real day-to-day basis. Someone asked about EEO considerations, if they are in a job and the job description is not accurate or doesn't take into account EEO considerations. If you have a complaint, we can't emphasize enough that if you have a complaint, you need to file a complaint and contact BHR directly. That's not the purpose of this survey, to field complaints about inappropriate job assignments or what have you. Also involve BHR in those discussions. If you have a complaint about your supervisor, or if you have a question, you can frame it as an inquiry, but please do not think that this is our attempt to deal with issues that need to be dealt with on a different basis. If you have a complaint, please file one. The next question, the next question I think is about supervisors. So supervisors are also employees. They have their own managers, their own supervisors. If you are a supervisor, please submit your own survey as it pertains to your own job. Looking at a few more questions, we have about 6 minutes left. For employees without their own email addresses on the state system, this is a very good question. If you would like us to email you a copy of the survey at a personal email address, you must contact us from that personal email address at classification.compensation@maine.gov. Otherwise, we won't have your personal email address. So please go ahead and do that, and we will send you a survey to that personal email address that you'd like us to have. One other person asked, what do you do if your job is in transition to new yet undefined tasks? Excellent question. Do the best you can. Answer the job survey about your job today, but also note, I am about to transition to a new role and the tasks are undefined. That is a very good answer. If that, please answer truthfully. That's also a good policy, is to tell the truth. And we want to know what the day-to-day reality of your job is. I think that is all the questions I'm seeing. We did publish some answers to some frequently asked questions in the Q&A window. We also encourage people to email us if you have a very specific or niche question that might only apply to you, or if you think it only applies to you. We did our best to answer frequently asked questions. We'll also be updating the FAQ page on our intranet web page as those roll in, so that folks with the same question will get the answers that they need. TL, did you have anything else you needed to add before we wrap for the day?
No, I think we got it covered. We really appreciate everybody taking the time to dial in and listen and learn about the project and how to complete the questionnaire and how important the information they provide is to the project. So I just wanted to say thanks again to everybody.
Thank you, TL. We really appreciate your time and effort, and we wish all of you a fantastic day and a really great weekend. Bye, everyone.